So yeah, we're here with Isaac, who is representing the Akora speakers, which you've seen many times on my channel, long-time subscribers. Every show report I've done, I've mentioned them in one of the speakers of note. They usually fill huge rooms. This is a chance to hear them in a much more modest room that is more realistic. And so while they're setting them up, I thought they're still going to do some more setup, but I've done some test tones and some stuff already. I'll share with you guys in the video. But Isaac, you want to tell us a little bit about it from your perspective, why you chose this brand, and anything else you want to share?
Yeah, well, I'm really excited to represent Akora Acoustics. It's a really innovative product. And the reason it's innovative is because it has really simple answers to some rather complex problems. And one of those problems, of course, is how do you create the best cabinet? Well, handcrafted from stone, all of these elements have been compressed for millions and millions of years. And so there are some really unique properties to granite, quartzite, other types of stone materials because of their heterogeneous properties and what we can do with slabs. So a huge part of what makes this special is that this is a mathematically designed cabinet that doesn't have any internal bracing. So when we look at other exotic loudspeakers in our industry, a huge component of what makes them special is the deadness of the cabinet. But when you achieve that by using lots of internal structures and bracing, the back wave of the driver interacts with that and creates a distortion. In fact, if you have internal bracing, 100% of the sound bouncing around inside of the cabinet is distortion. So when that leaves the front of the cone, you hear that as smearing of time, or other manufacturers will simply dissipate that back wave in other innovative fashions. The downside to dissipating the back wave, though, is losing some of the efficiency. So not only do we have a beautiful cabinet where we don't have to worry about internal reflections, but we actually get to use the full output of the driver, and that gives us a lot more sensitivity. Why is sensitivity important? Because that's the drive in music. If we're working really hard, and by that I really mean the amplifier, the system is working hard, it's hard to get the pianissimo to pianissimo. It's hard to go from sforzando to mezzo forte. It's the small breaths that make this really special. And part of why this is important to us is we want to make sure that we can deliver a flagship end goal product that can be driven by a variety of electronics. So if you have a very, very large room, obviously a large solid state amplifier has a lot of amazing and desirable qualities. But if you have a more modest room, like we're in today in real life, you could use a competent integrated amplifier, even with power driven by tubes, and that allows you to get tremendous dynamic qualities, all that breath, the realism, that space, and you're not defined by having a lot of output in that amplifier. This also means that you can start with your destination loudspeaker and make things better over time. So as opposed to trading out everything in your system, you can improve the quality of your cables, you can get better power conditioning, you can get a better CD player or even an analog rig in order to complement these. Now, this is the SRC2. I will say this is designed for medium to large size rooms. We also have a smaller version of this, the SRC1, that's in the same size. You've seen this before in real life, with just the single driver. And one of the things I want to take a moment to speak about with the Akora line, particularly that SRC1, is how close to the back wall you can place this. Many reference loudspeakers in our industry require a great deal of space to breathe, if you will, and even in this setup we brought them forward a little bit to get some of that spaciousness. But I'm really proud of what we were able to do with the two-way in the same size, because if you're like most of us, you have a real room, you might have a spouse or somebody else in your life who also insists on using some of that space, and being able to place it closer to the wall is going to give you much more of your usable space. The final thing about the granite that I want to point out is that this is a lifetime product. When we think about cars, for example, and the paint that's on those cars, we know that every 5-10 years or so, you need to do something, right? You need to wax them, you need to do something with that paint finish in order to keep it looking great. Well, the same thing is going to be true of automotive paint finished loudspeakers placed in a living room, for example, exposed to the sun. Because of the unique construction of granite, the stone materials in this essentially have a lifetime of resilience. So they're not going to change color, they're not going to change character based on exposure to UV light. nor are they affected by hot and cold. So if you happen to live in a humid environment, or if you live where I do, say in the mountains in Denver, Colorado, all of those temperature changes are eventually going to stress certain components in MDF or HDF or even aluminum loudspeakers. Granite has very little thermal expansion coefficient, so whether it gets really hot or really cold, these speakers really stay the same. And so this is an opportunity to buy a pair of loudspeakers, place them into a room, and leave them there for 15, 20, or even 30 years while you build the system around that.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about a few other things that I don't think people know a lot about in terms of the driver complement. These are very high-end drivers, so let's talk about what they're using here.
You know, thanks for pointing that out. That's absolutely true. So you might be familiar in this industry with a component manufacturer named ScanSpeak. They produce some of the most exotic drivers in the world and some very famous, very expensive, almost $750,000 loudspeakers use some of these components. What's unique about Aqora is how we have these modified and how they're designed. So these are a modification of a ScanSpeak design that is proprietary to us. And I will say that the critical component of the modification is reducing the mass of the drivers themselves. So even if you've seen something that looks similar, this is one of the lowest mass versions of these. And so just like in a car moving from steel to aluminum wheels and aluminum wheels to cast magnesium, all of these reductions in weight mean more explosiveness, more sensitivity, more of that breadth. This is also a 99.5% ScanSpeak.
Sorry, I gotta get stuff out.
Yeah.
Yes, that's here. Andy, the waivers for all the stuff.
So I guess tweeters. I just got to remember we're on tweeters.
Yeah, I'll just cut it out.
Yeah. You're really good at this. Your videos are freaking awesome, man.
Thank you.
Some of the best in terms of how they feel. Every time you put something up, people reach out to me to say, like, dude,
Really?
this stuff looks awesome. I don't know exactly how you did it, but these can sometimes be difficult to capture in real life, right? Because of the granite.
Yeah.
And so when you shot the video for 3MA a few weeks ago, you just got really good depth. You
Yeah,
got
that kind of
good
feel.
lighting, and so it really helped people to get more of, like, how do you say this? There's like almost a little blue or gray.
Yeah.
Even though it's a black granite, that blue-gray creates a lot of depth. But if you don't have a good sense of composition,
Yeah.
right, it's really hard to get the depth. And I like this, it's only in person. It's like you can see the reflection of the carpet and all these other things. And so it allows the speaker to both dissolve into the room, sort of disappear, and yet it has an obelisk-like presence to it that makes it a lot of fun with light.
Yeah, well, I think the obelisks and that's actually cool, I think, for a lot of people that understand, not only from an aesthetic standpoint, but for a stability standpoint. A triangle is a far superior design than a square box. And what we're doing here is kind of
Yes.
coming to leverage angles such that it's a stronger cabinet design.
And one of the things we can point out about granite as well is that granite is incredibly resilient. I'm going to hurt myself before I can hurt
Yes,
this.
yes.
So it turns out that many music lovers have children and they have pets, dogs, and cats and other animals running around. It's very, very, very hard to scratch this in real life. In fact, I have moved these without socks on a dolly. That's metal on granite, and I still don't receive scratches on the granite. So this is a lifetime product in that sense.
Right.
It's very resilient. And one of the cool things as opposed to paint is, God forbid something happens, like you drop this, right?
Yeah.
It falls on the floor while you're moving it, which is very hard to do. I actually can repair much of the damage, like in the customer's home in person.
Okay.
So these don't always have to be packed up, and that's part of the value. So
All right.
you think about what happens with paint. Very hard for me to correct a paint issue in house.
Yeah, you have
But
to bring
I
it
can
in.
fix granite in house, which is very, very cool.
And you can clean it the same way you clean basically your countertops, basically.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, the only thing you really don't want to touch is anything around that tweeter or anything around
Sure.
mid-range drivers. We buff these out regularly with just a microfiber towel. But I personally, sometimes I'll take like granite cleaner, put it on the microfiber itself, and then polish with that, and that will restore the luster if after a few weeks or a few months, everybody's come up and touched it just like this, and you polish it out, it doesn't shine the way you think. Well, the cool thing about granite is you just restore, some of that shine through a great granite cleaner you can find anywhere at Home Depot. Just, again, avoiding those drivers.
It's not an audiophile granite cleaner?
I'm going to create one. It's only going to be $1,200 a bottle.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, and it's going to come in a very fancy box, right? It needs to feel great.
Green box.
So we were talking about the
Yes, I
tweeter,
was just gonna do that, so.
but I do want to actually, while we're talking about the cabinet real quick, one of the things people overlook when looking at high-end speakers is the depth and how it's going to fit in your room. So what's really cool about these is that this would fit obviously in a mansion just fine. We've seen it at shows fill huge rooms, but in a condo apartment, you're not going to need a lot of room like, let's say, a Rockport or even that Magico. Much more depth and a lot more consideration for wife acceptance factor. So sometimes a trade-off of granite, one color, whatever polarizing aspects can be offset by other things. You got to consider the entire package here. And like I said, for small form factor rooms, this to me is going to be a better choice in a lot of respects.
Jason, I couldn't have said it better myself. I was at an event recently. We placed our SRC2s into a very, very, very large room where another brand's flagship speakers were. And of course, instinctively, because we are visually oriented creatures, originally the loudspeakers were brought to the front where the front of the previous loudspeakers were. But of course, as we set them up, as you've been watching us do before we started shooting this video, we actually kept pushing them back and back and back, giving more of the square footage of the room back in this case, until this was basically at the rear of where that original very large speaker was, and it filled the space. So to your point, I really like these in a variety of true domicile environments because they don't take up as much space to create good sound. And the other flip side to that, of course, is you also don't need, as we said over there, a lot of power. So if you have a small environment, you can place them closer to the walls and drive it with a single component like an integrated amplifier with a built-in streamer. There are a lot of flagship loudspeakers that I personally adore that might not be as comfortable with 50 or 100 watts out of an integrated amplifier.
Yeah, of course. Bigger drivers require more power a lot of times. And yeah, that could snowball into other issues that you don't want to have to deal with. So we were talking about the tweeter though. Let's go to that real quick.
Absolutely. So this is the flagship beryllium tweeter from ScanSpeak. This is 99.5% beryllium. So one of the finest, most linear drivers that we have found. Now, a lot of the magic, I will say, within Core is understanding how to hand these drivers off to each other. So we do have a proprietary crossover design that is really exquisite because we don't take the tweeter down in frequency very low. So we let the tweeter exist where it is happiest. We let the mid-bass drivers exist where they're happiest. And so when you use the most linear portion of each of these drivers, it just makes it easier for all of the connected equipment to do its job.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at a frequency response curve, a lot of people only pay attention to how the drivers mate and if they mate to a flat. But really what I look at oftentimes is how each driver rolls off. And if they're hiccuping as they go down, guess what? Even though it's down at 10 dB, 20 dB, you're still going to hear some of that. And you're going to hear that hiccuping because it's not so much that it doesn't net to a sum of flat, but each driver has its own sonic signature. And so when it's playing something that the other driver is playing and you're hiccuping, that can be heard. It can be, it takes a lot of the purity out of it. So in any case, go ahead. Anything else we wanted to talk about?
No, I think that's such an elegant description because if you get into one of those nulls, just like you're saying, where these drivers hand off to each other and it's not a seamless handoff, then you're right, you suddenly hear a chugging or a distortion between these drivers. I really want to say one last thing, which is about the crossover design, which is proprietary. We do a lot of things within that crossover to reduce the number of components that can wear out over time. So we try to do things that minimize the application of things like resistors. It changes from loudspeaker to loudspeaker. It changes, of course, upon the design. But one of the really interesting things is the lack of mostly or essentially consumable components within the crossover. So crossovers that rely on things like resistors and other components like that, even electrolytic capacitors, those components are going to change over time. They are designed to wear out to do a certain function. Val has spent an enormous amount of time, research, and money innovating a new type of crossover that really doesn't utilize consumable parts right in the signal path. So that means that not only do you get a cabinet that's designed to last for a lifetime in any environment, but the crossover itself is also designed to complement the lifetime aesthetic of the product. And so that means when your dealer, perhaps 3MA, installs this loudspeaker in your room, you can rest assured that it's going to sound the same for the lifetime of that product, not necessarily requiring you to move to the next thing. And that allows you to keep working on your music collection, which of course is what this is all about.
That does bring up a good question, though. How would you access the crossover? Is it below, at the bottom of the speaker?
The crossover is actually sealed inside. So
Okay.
if we had to do crossover work, we would go ahead and take that back to Akora and
Gotcha.
do it there.
Okay, yeah, once it's sealed. But this is a ported speaker, a small
Yes.
port on the back. No obvious port chuffing that I've ever heard. Frequency response range. What is this rated at?
This plays flat, down to 29 cycles. in
Okay.
row. Now, I say flat because this is important, because I think, Jason, in our industry, a lot of people talk about 20 to 20 in-room response,
Right.
but that doesn't give us everything, because we talk about room boundary reinforcements and things like that. So what does flat to 29 mean? Flat to 29 means, on average, useful response in room at 24 to 26 cycles. That's really important because that's the subharmonic on the low string of the bass guitar. So it gives you a complete sense of that instrument and provides a foundation for other instruments such as pipe organ. So even though you're not going to get full output at, say, 18 cycles, you are in a position where you're going to be able to get the full structure of the music with just these loudspeakers.
Yeah, so, and actually I did some test tones to see exactly what you could hear at a listening position, and right at 30 hertz we started to hear it for sure. So yeah, this is essentially a full range speaker. You could obviously mate it with a sub if you're into really a bigger room and need all that, and I'm sure that you would not demand the sub to do a whole lot since you're already pretty linear at 30 hertz. And I did test tones that compare this one to the Magico S7s that were just here. I'll let you guys listen and make your own conclusion, but I think there was a clear preference, at least in my mind, based on what I heard. So we thank you, Isaac, for giving us a little synopsis of these. I've featured them many times in the past. They're definitely one of my favorites. And another gentleman here, Joel, I don't know where he is. These are now his favorites. So yeah, you're winning fans every day. So thanks again. Anything else? What do you think, Joseph?
I think they're awesome.
Okay.
Great stuff.
Okay. Well, there you have it. Joseph has spoken.
Well, Jason, I really appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit about these in person with you. Just to give Joel a quick little bit, the artwork behind me is actually his, and it's interesting to know how cleanly it matches with the aesthetic of the black granite.
And also Lady Gaga.
So.
Anything, Luis? What do you think?
No, I think we're very happy to have these. I think it's been an overall consensus from everybody that's been here and experienced the speaker. I don't think there's been anybody who's said that they don't sound good. Everybody's been, pretty much affirming how good they sound. That's a big telling factor for us as a dealer. When we just have a speaker here on display, and all of a sudden we get all this buzz and interest, that really tells us something whenever we're looking at a speaker line. So it's been great. Isaac's wonderful to work with, and so far Akora has been very good to work with as well.
Yeah, so I've been touting these ever since the February show in Tampa, and then I can confirm every time I've come in here since we've had these, everybody has been consensus impressed, and I see a lot of stuff come through here. So there definitely is a market difference since these have come in compared to other speakers. So kudos to you guys. Say hello to the Akora guys for me.
I sure will. I have one last thing I'd like to share that I think is really interesting as we're talking about what makes these unique. We live in a world today where many of the things that we desire most take a long time to get to us. One of the unique innovations of Ecora is understanding how to use math and engineering to produce these. So there are brands that you will have to spend some time waiting for, but my commitment to dealers right now is, on average, for these Black Granite loudspeakers, you can usually take these home within 8 to 10 business days from ordering.
That's amazing.
So
Yeah.
in an industry where sometimes 4, 6, 8, 9 months has become something of the standard, it means a lot to me that I can provide music, provide something that moves people in a time frame that might be more compatible with their busy schedules.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good point to make, because nowadays, yeah, people are waiting months, if not a year.
Which is 6 to 8 months. I mean, 6 to 8 months. Yeah.
I'll
Yeah.
tell you that the last pair of loudspeakers that I purchased, which was one of 10 limited edition for a high-end loudspeaker manufacturer, took me 8.5 months to get into my home. So the idea of being able to offer something of this quality level that can provide so much pressure, but much more importantly, musical enjoyment, connectivity to things that move us, it means a lot to me that Val has innovated a product that can come to you in a short period of time.
And what is the price point of these right now?
So the SRC2s are currently $37,000. The pure two-way that I talked about briefly, the SRC1, which doesn't have the second mid-bass driver, is $28,000, and the stand mount, the SRB, starts at $15,000 plus stands.
And almost all of them just the standard finish. I think I've talked to Val before. He can do whatever if you really want it, but this is pretty much the one option.
I think stone is really interesting. And if somebody has something totally fascinating, a bespoke granite counter or something that they want something totally special to match, I would say reach out, give us an opportunity. Let's see what we can source.
Okay.
Because there are some unique one-off opportunities to build something for somebody that might be just for them.
Which, in that case, then you can understand an 8-month wait versus
Yes, I mean,
buying.
I'm not
yeah.
promising 8 to 10 days for
Right.
that. That's going to take a few
Sure,
months for
sure.
us. But I think for the average consumer, the person who's really looking at this loudspeaker, it's heartening for them to know that they can take this home today, play it on their existing system, while their dealer works on picking up the additional gear that they've specified for the system.
No, that's a great point. So again, thanks again, Isaac, and I'm sure we'll see you soon at the shows.
Thanks so much, Jason. I appreciate you for coming by.